I am a long-haul trucker, and for over 10 years, I've driven on almost every highway, and us seeing strange things at night is just part of the job. But I've never fully told anyone about what happened to me in Montana in December 2023. Because to this day, I still don't believe that what I saw that night was human. What's even stranger is that everything started with a seemingly ordinary, tiny detail. Right before I hit the highway, the elderly cashier said just one sentence as she handed me my receipt. "Whatever happens at 03:13 a.m. do not look in the rearview mirror." At that moment, I thought it was just a weird joke, if only it had been. My name is Daniel Harris. I was 34 years old at the time, hauling medical equipment from Washington to Montana. The cargo had to arrive on time, so driving through the night was my only option. The weather forecast showed no snow, the roads were clear, and I knew the route well. Around 9 in the evening, I pulled over at a small roadside gas station. I filled up the rig's tank and bought myself some coffee and a sandwich. A woman in her 70s was working at their register. As she handed me the receipt, she looked at my face in a strange way. Then in a whisper, she said that exact sentence: "Whatever happens at 03:13 a.m. do not look in the rearview mirror." I smiled and asked if she was joking. The woman didn't smile at all, she just lowered her head. I chalked it up to fatigue and left the store, but as I got into the truck, the receipt caught my eye. The woman had written something on the back of the receipt with a pen. I flipped it over. There were only 3 words: "Driving forward." I put the receipt in my pocket, started the engine, and the faint lights of the gas station slowly faded behind me. The night was quiet. No snow, no rain, not even a breath of wind. The stranger thing about Montana highways is that sometimes you drive for hundreds of kilometers without seeing a single car. The first half hour went exactly like that. Old country songs were playing on the radio. I set the cruise control to 65 miles per hour, and the road ahead stretched out under the headlights like an endless black ribbon. Yet, the cashier woman's words just wouldn't leave my mind. "Whatever happens at 03:13 a.m. do not look in the rearview mirror." Normally, I would laugh off words like that. Long-haul drivers hear 1,000 kinds of legends. Some say don't stop on a certain bridge. Others say if you see a woman in a white dress on a particular highway, it's best not to stop. I didn't believe any of them. I had been behind the wheel for 10 years, and every miracle I had encountered so far had a logical explanation. And yet, there was something different about this woman. She wasn't joking. I could feel it from her eyes. I looked at my phone. It was 09:48 p.m. That meant there were still more than 5 hours left until 03:13. I laughed to myself. "Daniel, what on earth are you thinking about?" To drop the topic, I switched to another radio channel. A few minutes later, the CB radio crackled, "Breaker 19. Anyone out there?" I felt relieved upon hearing this voice. That meant there were other trucks nearby as well. I picked up the mic. "Right here, Daniel." Heading east, there was a few seconds of silence. Then a deep male voice answered. "How's the road? Clear. Did you stop at the gas station 15 minutes ago?" The man paused for a moment. "Which station?" I named it. The radio fell silent again. Then the man said softly, "Is the woman who gave you the receipt still there?" I was surprised. "Yes." "Did she have white hair?" "Yeah." "There any other customer besides you?" "No." The radio static crackled for a few seconds. Then the man said, "Brother, I was at that station 2 hours ago." "So what?" "There was no one there." I laughed and shook my head. "Shift change, probably." The man didn't answer right away. Then he said just one sentence, "I wish it were that simple," and the radio went dead. I called out to him again. "Hey, do you copy?" No one answered, only static noise. I put it down to signal loss. It was normal for CB radios to act like that in mountainous areas. About an hour later, I saw another truck parked on the shoulder for the first time. It was an old Peterbilt. Its hazard lights were flashing. The driver had opened the hood. Normally, in situations like this, I would pull over and help. But the shipment couldn't be delayed. I passed by without slowing down. As I passed, the man raised his hand. It was as if he was trying to stop me. Looking in the mirror, he was still standing in the middle of the road. For some reason, an uneasy feeling washed over me. But I kept going. Not 2 minutes passed before my phone rang. It was the company dispatcher. "Looks like you've gone off route." "What do you mean?" "GPS shows that you've been sitting at the exact same spot for 5 minutes. I looked at the speedometer, 65 miles per hour. The engine was running, the road was moving ahead. I haven't stopped, I'm driving. The dispatcher paused. GPS is showing something else. Check it again, that's why I called. I looked out the window. We passed a road sign. Written on it was, mile 184. I hung up the phone. I told myself there must be a satellite signal issue. However, 10 minutes later, another road sign appeared. When the headlights illuminated it, my heart almost stopped for a second. It had the exact same writing on it. Mile 184. I slowed down without touching the brakes. No, that's impossible. I looked back. There was nothing. I looked ahead. The highway stretched out in the exact same way. Maybe it's a second sign, I thought. But as I passed right beside it, I saw a small arrow drawn in red paint on the bottom section of the sign. I had seen this before, in the exact same spot, in the exact same shape. This was the exact same sign. I was passing by it for the second time. My heart began to beat a little faster. I was searching for a logical explanation. Maybe I took a wrong highway. Maybe it's a loop. I opened the GPS screen. The screen was frozen on the map. My truck wasn't moving at all. At that exact moment, the CB radio crackled again. This time the voice was different from before. It was a very old man's voice, muffled, as if it wasn't coming through the mic. But from very far away, he said just one sentence. "What time is it, son?" I instinctively looked at my watch. 10:57 p.m. I answered into the mic. 3 minutes to 11. The radio fell silent. Then the old man whispered, "Good. So, you still have time." The voice from the radio cut off abruptly, and once again only static crackling could be heard. It pressed the mic button several times to call out to that driver, but no response came. Taking a deep breath, I told myself it was just a weak signal. The road was still empty. The speedometer didn't change. The engine's monotonous hum was steady enough to put a person to sleep. I took a sip of my coffee to wake myself up. It had gone cold. As I closed the thermos lid, my eye caught the receipt. For some reason, I wanted to pull it out and look at it again. The sentence, "I keep driving forward," written by the woman, looked darker than before. It was as if the ink had just bled out from inside the paper. As I tried to flip the receipt over, a faint thin line on the back that wasn't there before caught my attention. I held the paper up to the light. It wasn't a line. It looked like a very faintly drawn map. On the map, there was only a highway and a small circle dot on it. Next to that dot, just one number was written, 313. I knitted my brows. When did this woman draw this? I whispered to myself. I hadn't paid attention to it when I received the receipt. At that exact moment, a car approached from the opposite direction. It was the first vehicle I had seen in the last hour. Its headlights were unusually bright. As it passed by me, I instinctively looked in the mirror. There was nothing behind me. The car had vanished into thin air. It was impossible for a car to disappear in 2 seconds on a straight, long highway. I reduced my speed. Maybe it turned onto another road, I said, but there were no exits around. My phone received another message from the dispatcher. "Daniel, why are you still at mile 184? I immediately typed back. "I've already covered at least 20 miles. The message wasn't sent. The network was completely gone. I set the phone on the dashboard. Just then, an old Molt sign appeared on the right side of the road. Half of its neon lights were burnt out. It read vacancy. The interesting part was that there was no trace of this motel on the GPS. I had no intention of stopping. The cashier woman's words, "Keep driving forward," came back to mind. For some reason, listening to her seemed much more logical this time. As I passed the motel, someone was standing in front of the entrance door. He was wearing a black jacket. It was impossible to make out his face. He was simply watching my truck. Without turning my head, I continued on my way. About 100 meters had passed when a strange feeling washed over me. I looked in the right side mirror. The motel was gone. There was no building, no sign, and no trace of that man. Only the empty plain stretched out on the side of Thorold. It was as if nothing had ever been there. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I tried to tell myself it's exhaustion, but my brain wasn't buying it. Then my eye caught the fuel gauge. Just half an hour ago, I had completely filled the tank. Now the gauge was showing 3/4. This was impossible. If there were an engine problem, the warning light would come on. But everything on the panel was normal. A few minutes later, a small green sign appeared on the side of the highway. I slowed down a bit. Read it. The sign read, "Next service 86 miles." It was a normal piece of information. But on the lower section, another sentence had been added later in white paint. "Stop for her this time." A cold shiver ran through my body. The highway department hadn't written this message. Someone had added it later, but who was her? The cashier woman, the figure in front of the motel, or someone I had yet to encounter? I didn't know the answer, but for the first time, I felt that I was not alone on this highway. The highway sank back into silence. Aside from the rhythmic hum of the engine and the faint sound of tires on the asphalt, nothing could be heard. I, on the other hand, was trying to line up the mismatched events in my head. The same mile sign, the frozen GPS, the strange voices on the radio, the map appearing on the back of the receipt, and now the "Don't stop for her" writing. Calling all of these a coincidence was becoming increasingly difficult, yet I still forced myself to think logically. Staying behind the wheel for long hours sometimes showed a person things that weren't there. The road ahead suddenly took a gentle dip. Faint lights were visible in the distance. At first, I thought I was approaching a small town. But as I drew closer, I saw that it wasn't a town, but dozens of trucks parked along the side of the road. All were lined up in the same direction. What was strange was that not a single engine sound could be heard. Their headlights were on, but none of them were moving. I reduced my speed. As I passed the first truck, I saw the driver. He was sitting behind the wheel. His head was resting against the windshield. He was motionless. In the second truck, it was the exact same scene, and in the third, and in the fourth. It was as if all the drivers had fallen asleep at the exact same moment. No, not asleep. They were frozen. I pressed the gas a bit more. I wanted to get away from this scene as quickly as possible. At that very moment, the CB radio kicked back on. "Daniel." This time the voice called my name. I didn't pick up the mic. "Daniel." The voice was coming closer. "Don't look at them." Instinctively, I looked to the left. The driver of one of the trucks had already raised his head. His face was still not visible, but it was clear he was looking at my truck. Then, one after another, the others began raising their heads as well. Dozens of drivers, all at once, were looking at me. I floored the accelerator. A few seconds later, all of them were left behind. I took a deep breath. This is impossible. I had started talking to myself out loud. This rarely happened to me. When a person is truly frightened, sometimes the silence feels even heavier. I looked at my watch. 11:41 p.m. There was still a long way to go until 03:13. But for some reason, time was passing agonizingly slowly. About 10 minutes later, I saw an old police car on the right side of the road. Its blue and red lights were flashing. Finally, a normal human being. I pulled the truck over to the shoulder. The police officer approached with slow steps. The beam of the flashlight didn't fall on his face. His hat covered his eyes. I rolled down the window. "Good evening, officer." He said nothing. He simply pointed at the receipt with his hand. I was confused. Which receipt? He didn't speak again. He pointed at my pocket with his finger. A strange feeling washed over me from within. I pulled out the receipt and handed it to him. The officer looked at the paper, then he handed it back to me. He spoke for the first time. His voice was the old man's voice I had heard on the radio. He said just one sentence, "Don't lose it." Then he turned around. I looked in the mirror. The police car was gone. No lights, no vehicle, no officer. The side of the road was completely empty again. My hands truly began to tremble this time. And for the first time, that exact moment was when I stopped considering the cashier woman's words a joke. I drove for several kilometers without thinking about anything. I was exhausted from searching for logic behind every event that was unfolding. My fingers on the steering wheel had turned white. Every now and then I would tell myself, "Calm down," but my beating heart wouldn't listen. Suddenly, the clock on the dashboard caught my attention. A moment ago it was 11:41 p.m. Now it showed 11:42 p.m. It felt to me like at least 15 minutes had passed. I grabbed my phone and checked its clock. It showed the exact same time. Time had seemingly slowed down. I grabbed the thermos to drink some coffee. As I opened the lid, a thin steam rose from inside. This was impossible. I had bought that coffee 2 hours ago, and it had gone cold long since. Cautiously, I took a sip. It was hot, as if it had been prepared 5 seconds ago. I immediately put the thermos back in its place. This time I couldn't find any explanation whatsoever. A large green sign appeared on the right side of the road. "Rest area, 2 miles normally, I would stop at places like this to wash my face and walk around a bit. But the cashier's sentence, "Keep driving forward," came to mind. Despite this, a part of my brain washing that stopping would be safer. Finally, I decided to just pass by the rest stop slowly. 2 miles later, the rest area appeared. There were only 3 vehicles, a pickup, a sedan, and a white minivan. All of their headlights were off, but their engines were running. Exhaust smoke was coming out, just as I was about to pass by them without slowing down. The pickup's driver's side door swung open. A man about 50 years old stepped out. Waving his hands, he was signaling for me to stop. His face was filled with panic. I tapped the brakes for a split second. At that very second, the receipt rustled inside my pocket. It was as if someone had squeezed it with their hand. Reflexively, I put my hand into my pocket. The receipt was hot, very hot, hot enough to burn my fingers. I pulled it out and looked at it. A new sentence that wasn't there before had appeared on it. He waves. "Don't stop." My heart jumped into my throat. When I raised my head, the man was already standing in the middle of the road. He was waving his hands even more desperately, and behind him, someone was sitting inside the pickup. Because it was dark, the face couldn't be made out, but that figure wasn't moving at all. I hit the gas. The truck began to pick up speed heavily. The man threw himself to the side at the last moment. As I passed by him, I looked at his face for a second. The terror on his face wasn't because of me. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the back of my truck. This detail was driven into my mind like a nail. The back again. The cashier woman had also told me not to look back. And now this man was looking back as well, summoning all my willpower. I did not look in the rearview mirror, but a voice inside me was whispering, "There is something behind you." It's hard to express this feeling in words. Sometimes you sit alone in a room, and for no reason at all, you feel that someone is watching you. Your mind knows it's impossible, but your body refuses to believe it. That was exactly what I was experiencing in the truck that night. It felt as though someone was sitting quietly behind the cab in the dark space between the cargo area and the seats. I didn't turn to look. I didn't dare to look. To calm myself down, I opened the window a crack. The cold Montana air rushed inside. Thuend hitting my face brought me back to my senses for a few seconds. "You're tired, Daniel," he whispered. All of this is your mind playing tricks right at that moment. A very faint sound came from behind me. Tap. I froze dead. The sound didn't come from the trailer nor from the engine. It had come from inside the cab. A few seconds passed. Again. Tap. This time it sounded as if it came from under the back seat. To avoid looking in the mirror, I turned my chin toward the windshield. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard that my fingers ached. A third time. Tap. This time a slow dragging noise followed the sound. It felt as if someone was dragging their foot across the floor. The pressure in my chest mounted. I told myself no circumstances will I look back. That exact moment my phone vibrated. There was still no network service, yet a message had arrived from an unknown number. I couldn't understand how I received it. Only one sentence was written in the message. "It is not behind you." I knitted my brows. Not. A second message arrived. "It is already in the front seat." My body turned to ice. Reflexively, I wanted to look to the right, but I stopped myself. No, this was meant to scare me. I took a deep breath. I tossed the phone onto the dashboard. At that exact second, the seatbelt on the passenger seat, without anyone touching it, lightly buckled with a click sound. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't turn my head. I wasn't supposed to turn it. Component out of the corner of my eye, I made out a black shadow sitting in the passenger seat. I couldn't see its face. I felt that something was there. I floored the gas pedal. Despite the heavy load, the truck began to pick up speed. Just then, a large, brightly lit truck stop appeared in the distance ahead. Dozens of trucks, bright lights, people, normal life. For the first time, I thought I was going to be saved. However, about half a mile before the truck stopped, all the lights went out at the exact same time. The highway was plunged back into total darkness. Only my headlights illuminated the road, and out from within that darkness, the CB radio crackled one last time. This time, a different voice spoke. This was my own voice, and it said just one sentence: "Daniel, do not reach 03:13 a.m." A deathly silence reigned inside the truck. The sentence "Daniel, do not reach 03:13 a.m." coming from the radio echoed repeatedly in my mind. To avoid looking at the passenger seat, I had focused all my attention on the road. A few minutes later, a small junction appeared ahead. The GPS was still frozen, so I looked at the directional sign. The sign on the left read I-90 East. The sign on the right had only one word: Black Creek. What was interesting was that under that writing, it seemed to be scratched with a sharp object, and beneath it another barely legible sentence was visible: cross before 0313. I chose the highway on the left. The moment I turned the wheel, a heavy impact sound came from the back of the truck. It sounded as if someone had slammed a fist against the trailer door. I didn't look in the mirror. The words spoken by the cashier woman replayed in my mind. A few seconds later came a second impact. Then a third. After that, everything went quiet. Not 5 minutes passed before I saw another semi-truck ahead. For the first time, I was coming across another driver who was actually moving. He was going at a speed matching mine. I'd decided to contact him via the CB radio, Breaker 19. "Do you copy?" This time an answer came immediately. "I copy." The driver's voice was young. "Name's Mike." I felt a brief sense of relief. "I'm Daniel. I'm experiencing a few weird things." "Are you on this highway too?" "Yes." "Can you see me?" "Yes." "Is there anything behind me?" A long silence ensued on the radio. Then Mike said very softly, "Daniel, driving alone, there's nothing behind your trailer. Someone is sitting next to your seat." My entire body froze. I didn't turn my head. "What does it look like?" Mike took a deep breath. "I can't see its face. It's not looking at me. It's looking at you." I floored the accelerator pedal. The semi in front of me increased its speed as well. A few seconds later, Mike screamed on the radio, "Daniel, don't look, under no circumstances look to your right," followed by the horrifying sound of screeching brakes, metal crunching against metal, glass shattering. Then complete silence. I didn't look in the mirror. I called out to Mike on the radio. No answer came, only static noise. My heart was beating like crazy. About 10 minutes later, I saw an overturned semi-truck on the side of the road. No police, no ambulance, no fire. Just an overturned truck. And on top of the cab, written in large letters, "Mike Transport." I pulled my foot off the gas. This was the driver I had just talked to, but something didn't add up. The crash hadn't just happened. The truck was covered in rust. Its windows were caked with dirt. Its tires were sunk halfway into the dirt, as if it had been sitting there for months. Holding my breath, I passed by it. Just as I passed, I saw the driver sitting inside the cab. He slowly turned his head toward me. His face was covered in blood, yet he was smiling for the last time. His voice was heard on the radio. "I told you. It's looking at you." And the connection was cut for good. Part 2 ends here, and in Part 3, Daniel will begin to approach the real meaning of the 0313 secret for the first time. I wanted to step on the brakes, but my foot felt as if it wouldn't move. The overturned truck off guy I had just talked to on the radio was sitting in rust by the roadside. This meant only two possibilities. Either my mind was playing tricks on me, or time wasn't flowing normally on this highway. Gripping the wheel tightly, I kept driving. I made a firm decision with myself. I wasn't going to stop until 0313, and 15 minutes later, my phone caught a signal again. Messages started coming in one after another. All of them were from the company. "Daniel, where are you? We've been calling you for 3 hours. The truck isn't moving." Confused, I looked at the clock. 12:18 am. There was no way 3 hours had passed. I called the dispatcher. This time the line went through. "Daniel, finally. Where are you?" "I'm on the highway." "Are you crazy? Why? GPS shows that you've been at the exact same coordinates for 6 hours. I said nothing. The dispatcher continued. "We sent the police. They can't find your truck." That exact moment, the line crackled. Then an unfamiliar woman's voice was heard. "Daniel, turn off the phone," and the connection cut. I immediately switched off the phone. I was already realizing that every device I used tonight was working against me. A few miles later, an old school bus was standing in the middle of the highway. Its headlights were off. Its door was open. No one was visible around. I approached slowly. As I passed by the bus, I looked inside. All the seats were empty. Only in the very last row sat a little girl. She must have been about 8 or 9 years old. She had an old teddy bear in her hand. She looked at me and smiled. Then she slowly raised her hand. With her hand, she pointed behind me. I immediately turned my eyes back to the road. I wasn't going to look. No matter what happened, I wasn't going to look. At that exact moment, a strange smell spread inside the truck's cab, the smell of old, wet soil, like the humidity felt in a cemetery after rain. Next, I heard breathing. This time it was very close, as if it was coming from the passenger seat, slow, deep, human breath. I held my breath. The sound stopped too. I breathed again. The sound started again too, as if someone was mimicking my breath. Suddenly, all the lights on the panel went out for a second, then turned back on. The radio turned itself on. This time there was no static at all. A very clear voice was heard. If you are hearing this, it means it's already too late. I recognized it. This was my voice, but older, more tired. You didn't listen to the cashier woman. At 03:13 a.m., you will look in the mirror. I looked too. The pressure in my chest built up even more. I whispered, "What does this mean?" A reply came from the radio. "Because I am you." At that exact moment, the clock showed 12:59 am, and in the distance, in the middle of the highway, I saw the exact same cashier woman. She was standing alone in the middle of the road, and in her hand was the receipt she had given me. The cashier woman was standing in the very middle of the highway. The cold wind slowly moved the hem of her coat, but she herself remained motionless. As I approached her in mid-truck, her facial features began to appear more clearly. This time she didn't look like the friendly old woman at the gas station. Her face was pale. There were deep dark circles under her eyes, and it looked as though she hadn't slept for days. The strangest thing was the receipt she held in her hand. It was identical to the receipt she had given me. The crease mark on it, even the small coffee stain on the lower section, looked exact. I didn't step on the brake, and the woman slowly shook her head while looking at me, as if, "Don't stop," she was saying. The moment the truck passed by her, my eyes involuntarily caught the edge of the right side mirror. I immediately composed myself and turned my gaze back to the road. It was merely 1 second. But during that 1 second, I had seen a strange thing in the mirror. The woman had not been left behind. She was still standing right beside the truck. It was as if I was moving and she was gliding alongside me at the exact same speed. My heart began to beat even faster. 5, 10, 15 seconds passed. Finally, the woman vanished. I took a deep breath. At that moment, the radio turned on again. This time there was no static noise. A very calm female voice was heard. "Daniel, didn't lie to you. Just couldn't tell you everything." I grabbed the mic. "Who are you? Why me?" There were a few seconds of silence. Then the woman answered, "Because you have already traveled this road once." My hands froze on the steering wheel. "What? This is the first time I've taken this road." The woman said very calmly, "No, you just don't remember." The radio fell silent again. I took a deep breath. These words began spinning in my head. "You have already traveled this road once." It was impossible. How could I forget a night like this? Just then, a strange warning light lit up on the truck's panel. "Rear door OP," and I immediately wanted to look in the mirror. But I stopped myself. The trailer's rear door couldn't be open. I had locked it myself before hitting the road. Besides, I was hauling medical equipment. If the door were open, the cargo would have spilled onto the road long ago. The warning light flashed on and off for 5 seconds, then lit up again. This time the radio began talking on its own. "Don't close the door. Under no circumstances stop. If you stop, it will stop too." I wanted to ask who was being spoken of, but the radio suddenly cut off. A few minutes later, an old, rusty road sign appeared ahead. Only one word was written on it. Black Creek. I had seen this name before, but now there was something different. Underneath the sign, another sentence written later in white paint was visible. "You remember. Don't look." My heart tightened. "If you remember." What was I supposed to remember? At that exact moment, a sharp pain started inside my head. A brief vision flashed before my eyes: a dark highway, an overturned truck, a shattered windshield, a man covered in blood, and the man sitting behind the wheel was me. The vision lasted for just 1 second, then everything vanished. I panicked. What was that? It felt as if my brain was trying to show a memory it had kept hidden for a long time, yet it wasn't letting me fully remember it. At that exact moment, the clock on the panel, for the first time, began to change rapidly. 01:07 a.m., 01:24 a.m., 01:58 a.m., 02:31 a.m. The numbers were moving fast right before my eyes. Then suddenly it stopped. 02:59 am, and all the lights of the truck went out at the exact same time. The highway was plunged into complete darkness, and within the darkness, on the right side of the cab, for the first time, a very soft whisper was heard. 3 minutes left. Darkness had swallowed the cab. The engine was still running, but all indicators on the panel had gone dark. Only the faint moonlight visible through the windshield made it possible to pick out the outline of the highway. The whisper coming from the right side was heard again. 3 minutes. This time the voice was closer than before. I didn't turn my head, looking straight ahead. I just said, "What do you want?" For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the same voice answered, "Your place." All the air was sucked out of my chest. I slammed the gas pedal all the way down. The engine roared. The truck surged forward at high speed. At that exact moment, the entire panel lit up again. The clock showed 03:10, and that meant only 3 minutes were left. Suddenly, bright spotlight beams appeared in the distance ahead. The road was completely blocked off. Police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances had sealed the highway. I took a sigh of relief. Finally, real people. As I drew closer, an officer signaled for me to stop with a flashlight in his hand. I slowed down. The truck had almost come to a complete stop. The officer came up to the window. When I saw his face, my blood ran cold. This was the police officer who had disappeared earlier, except this time his face was fully visible. The right side of his face was missing, as if it had been mangled in a horrific accident. Even so, he said in a calm voice, "Daniel, don't stop this time. If you stop here, you will never be able to leave." That exact moment, the lights of all the police cars behind went out. The ambulances disappeared. The road was left completely empty again. The officer wasn't there either. It was as if they had never been there. I could no longer distinguish what was real and what was not. The clock had reached 03:11 am. Suddenly, the phone turned on by itself. The camera app was running on the screen. The front camera, I was visible on the screen, but someone was also visible behind me. A tall, thin, completely black silhouette. It had leaned its head over my shoulder. I immediately threw the phone onto the seat. I didn't look back. I wasn't supposed to look. The cashier woman's voice came over the radio. "Don't look at the phone either. That is like a mirror too." For the first time, I began to understand what she meant. The problem wasn't just the rear-view mirror, anything that showed a person's act was dangerous. A mirror, a phone camera, a reflection in glass, all of them. The clock became 03:12 and the temperature inside the cab plummeted suddenly. My breath began to show like white steam. The entity sitting on the right side was no longer hiding. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it moving. Very slowly. It was turning toward me. Its whisper this time came right next to my ear. 1 minute. And at that exact second, a sentence that wasn't there before appeared on the upper section off the windshield on the inside of the glass, as if someone had written it with a finger on frost. At 03:13 am, it will force you to look back. I took a deep breath. I gripped the steering wheel even harder. I now understood that the real trial was beginning right now. As the seconds hand of the clock ticked forward, it felt as if the whole world began to slow down. The engine sound stretched out, and the hum produced by the tires on the asphalt grew strangely heavy. I was looking strictly forward. The numbers on the panel changed. 03:13 am. At that exact second, the engine died. The headlights went dark. The radio fell silent. The phone screen went black. The truck was moving, but no longer by the power of the engine. It was as if an invisible force was pulling it forward. Then, my mother's voice came from behind me. "Daniel." My heart squeezed tight. My mother had passed away 6 years ago. "Daniel, my son." The voice was so real that my eyes filled with tears. "Look back. I'm right here." My hands trembled. For a moment, I wanted to turn around. However, the cashier woman's voice was heard not from the radio, but as if from inside my own brain. "Don't listen to the voice." My mother's voice suddenly changed. "Please. I'm so scared." Then, that voice started screaming. Back. I closed my eyes. I bowed my head toward the windshield. No, no. At that exact second, another image formed on the windshield. This time, the glass began to act like a mirror. I was looking forward. Yet the inside of the truck was reflected in the glass. The dark figure sitting in the passenger seat was now visible. It looked like me, the same hair, the same face, the same clothes, except its eyes were completely black. It smiled slowly. Then it began to copy every movement I made. I took a breath. It took 1, 2. I blinked. It blinked 2. Then, For the first time, it did something different while I remained still. It slowly turned its head toward me and whispered, "You finally remembered me." That exact moment, forgotten memories flashed through my mind like lightning. I had driven this road before, the same highway, the same night, the same time, and at 03:13 a.m. I had looked in the rearview mirror. In the mirror, I had seen myself. Then the terrible crash had happened. The truck had overturned. I had died right there, my breath caught, so that meant this whole night was happening not before the crash, but after the crash. The cashier woman's voice was heard one last time from the radio. "Now you understand. Wasn't trying to save you. Was trying to pull you out of this loop." Daniel now knew the truth, yet this held an even more terrifying meaning. If he was already dead, then who was steering the wheel? And if the one sitting in the passenger seat was the real Daniel, who was the one behind the wheel? I let go of the steering wheel. Nothing changed. The truck continued to move forward at the exact same speed. My hands were no longer on the steering wheel, yet the truck was as if under the control of an invisible driver. I slowly looked down at my hands. They looked the same as before. However, when I caught my reflection in the chrome section of the wheel, my blood ran cold. In the reflection, I wasn't there. Behind the steering wheel sat a man with a mangled, blood-covered face. I immediately averted my gaze. The cashier woman was right. Any reflection showed me the truth. Suddenly, a deep metallic drone spread inside the cab. The figure in the passenger seat stood up. For the first time, I saw at full height. It was me. Except it was my state after the crash. On my face were the marks of shattered glass. My left eye was completely gone. My neck was bent at an unnatural angle. Even so, it was smiling. In a very quiet voice, it said, "You remember now." A trembling voice, I asked, "What is this? Why am I here?" It slowly approached me. "I am the real Daniel. You are." My last thought. Hearing these words, everything began to connect in my mind. At the moment of the crash, before dying, my brain had created the exact same night one last time. The receipt, the cashier, Mike, the officer, all of them were memories created to force me not to look in the mirror at 03:13 a.m. If I didn't look, perhaps the loop would break. But in previous loops, I had always looked. The figure reached its hand out to me. "Let's trade places. I'm tired now. Wanna leave? You stay in my place." The air inside the cab turned freezing cold. I wanted to pull back, but the seat wouldn't let me go. It was as if my body was glued to it. Suddenly, Mike's voice came over the radio. "Daniel, listen, it's lying." I believed what it said too. Then a loud explosion sound was heard. The radio fell permanently silent. The figure's face changed. It no longer looked like me. Its face began to stretch out. Its eyes turned into completely black voids. Its mouth opened twice as wide as a normal human's. And for the first time, it spoke in its own voice. "I'm not Daniel. I'm the first thing you looked at." That exact moment I remembered on the night of the crash. When I looked in the mirror, I hadn't seen myself first. I had seen it, then the crash had happened, so that meant this entity had been reliving the exact same crash for years, trying to create a new Daniel every time. I was supposed to be its next victim. The figure took another step toward me. The inside of the cab was freezing cold. A thin layer office was starting to form on the inside of the windows. Even though the engine wasn't running, the truck was still moving down the highway. These were no longer the rules of the normal world. "Don't come near me," I said. The entity tilted its head to the side, said those words hundreds of times. What hundreds of loops, every time the same, every time 03:13 a.m. I felt a squeezing pain in my brain. Short visions began passing before my eyes, the same highway, the same cashier, the same receipt, the same Mike, the same officer, and every time I looked back at the last moment, then the crash, then everything started over again. Suddenly I understood why the cashier woman said the exact same sentence every time, because she remembered this loop too. I shouted, "Who are you?" The figure smiled. "I have no name. People try to give me names: the shadow, the traveler, one behind, but none of these are true. I'm simply the gaze." This word confused me. The gaze, yes, when a person looks back in fear for the first time. I am born. Right at that moment, the cashier woman's voice was heard one last time on the radio. "Daniel, pull out the receipt." I reached into my pocket. The receipt was different than before. Now only one sentence was written on it: "To break the loop, look forward." I showed the paper to the entity. For the first time, it stopped smiling. Anxiety appeared on its face. No, She couldn't have given this to you. This is impossible. For the first time, I saw that it was afraid. The receipt began to warm up in my hand. Then white light began to emanate from its edges. A faint light filled the inside of the cab. The entity backed away. It screamed. You weren't supposed to remember. The windows began to crack. The highway was seemingly melting away. The road lines were disappearing. The surrounding mountains were dissolving like fog, as if this whole world consisted of merely a single memory, and that memory had begun to shatter. At that exact moment, I saw the crash site ahead, an overturned truck, a shattered cab, flashing emergency lights. Dozens of police officers, this time. They were real, and the body lying on the ground was me. For the first time, I understood all night long. I hadn't been driving toward a crash. I was returning to the moment of my own death. As I drew closer to the crash site, the sound of sirens began to be heard even more clearly. This time it was different from the previous ones. The lights weren't flickering out or vanishing. The police cars were actually there. Firefighters were working around the overturned trailer. Paramedics were trying to pull someone out from inside the cab, yet my truck wasn't slowing down at all. It was being pulled toward that crash as if on invisible tracks. The entity spoke again. It's your last chance. Just look back. We'll end everything. I shook my head no. This time, it grew furious. All the windows of the cab were suddenly covered in black shadows. The passenger door began opening and slamming shut on its own. All the indicators on the panel were flashing erratically like crazy. But I was looking strictly forward. Only a few meters were left to the crash site. Suddenly, everything stopped. Silence, complete silence. Then the highway vanished, the crash vanished, the police vanished. I found myself back in front of that small gas station. The clock showed 08:57 p.m. The journey hadn't even started yet. I took a deep breath again. Did the loop start over again? The door opened. Cashier woman walked out of the store. This time she approached me. For the first time there was sadness on her face. No, the loop was broken. I didn't understand anything. Why am I here again? The woman looked at my pocket, pull out the receipt. I pulled it out. The paper was completely blank. There was no writing at all. The woman smiled faintly. You don't need it anymore. You made your choice. You didn't look back. Asked, what about that entity? The smile vanished from the woman's face. It is still here, just. It's no longer with you. That exact moment, I saw my reflection in the store window. For the first time, I looked normal. There were no wounds. There was no blood. I breathed a sigh of relief, except my reflection in the glass, even though I didn't move, slowly turned its head toward me and smiled, and I had not smiled. Instinctively, I took a step back. My reflection in the glass, however, did not move from its spot. It was still looking at me. Then very slowly, it raised its hand. I didn't raise mine. This time I was certain. The one I saw in the glass was not me. The cashier woman immediately shut the store door. Don't look at the glass. I averted my eyes. What's going on? The woman was silent for a long time. Then, for the first time, she told everything. Years ago, strange things began happening on this highway. Some of the drivers who crashed had said that in their final seconds, they looked in the rearview mirror. Those who survived never forget one sentence. I was standing behind myself. I said nothing. The woman continued, this road feeds on human fear. If you turn and look at the last second, it takes your place. What about me? You resisted for the first time. That's why the loop was broken. Breathed a sigh of relief. Looks like it's all over. The woman slowly shook her head. No, just, this night is over. That exact moment, another semi-truck entered the gas station from a distance. A young driver stepped out of the vehicle. He looked tired. He walked toward the store. As I passed by him, our eyes happened to lock. I felt a strange sense of familiarity in his face, as if I knew him from somewhere. The driver approached the register. The woman handed him the receipt. I was standing at the door. I already knew what the woman was going to say. In the same calm voice, she said, whatever happens at 03:13 a.m., do not look in the rearview mirror. The young driver smiled, just like I had done. Good joke. He grabbed his coffee and got into his truck. A few seconds later, he merged onto the highway and disappeared into the dark. I turned toward the cashier woman. Aren't we going to help him? The woman looked out the window at the highway. A person can only decide for themselves. Can only warn them. I walked out of the store. Morning was breaking. The first rays of sunlight were visible behind the mountains. Everything looked normal. My phone rang with a call from the company. Daniel, where are you? Did you deliver the load on time? I looked at my truck. The trailer was in place. The engine was running as if nothing had happened. I said only one word on my way. I hung up the phone. I got into the truck. This time I turned the rearview mirror down with my own hand. I never used it again. 3 years have passed since this event. I still work as a long-haul driver, but every time I pass through Montana, I look for that gas station. I can never find it. The strangest thing is that last month, I saw a news story on the internet. A young semi-truck driver had an accident on the Montana highway at 03:13 a.m. at night. The only surviving witness told the police just one sentence: "Before the crash, I saw myself in the rearview mirror, but the one smiling wasn't me." I have been driving a truck for 17 years, and in this job I've never broken one rule: never pick up anyone on the highway at night. But what I experienced in the Nevada desert in February 2024 showed me that sometimes not letting someone into your truck isn't enough to keep them away from you. That night, I heard only one warning on the radio: do not help the woman standing alone on Highway 95. I listened. Yet, she got into my truck. My name is Michael Turner. I am 41 years old and have been a long-haul trucker in the western states of the U.S. for 17 years. The Nevada highways have always given me a strange feeling. Deserts that seem endless during the day turn into a completely different place at night. You drive for hundreds of kilometers seeing no towns, no houses, and no people. Just the asphalt illuminated by your headlights and the darkness swallowing everything around. It was February 2024. I was hauling electronic equipment from Las Vegas to Oregon. The weather forecast was good. A light wind was blowing, the road was dry, and I knew the route well. Around 11 at night, I pulled over at a small gas station. I filled the tank, got myself coffee, and hit the road again. About 40 minutes later, the CB radio crackled. "Breaker 19, all drivers pay attention." The voice was very serious. "Multiple calls have come in regarding a young woman standing on the roadside on Highway 95, near mile 207. I thought it was a routine warning, but the dispatcher continued. "Do not pull over under any circumstances. Do not let the woman into your vehicle. Police are already on the way." Another driver spoke on the radio. "What happened? Is it a crime?" There were a few seconds of silence. Then the dispatcher answered in a strange tone. "We don't know. Because no patrol can find that woman." I knitted my brows. How could they not find a woman that a driver saw? The conversation on the radio ended. I kept driving. It was about 00:17 a.m. The road was completely empty. Suddenly, a white figure appeared in the distance under my headlights. She was standing on the right shoulder of the road. As I got closer, I saw that it was a young woman. Her clothes were covered in dust. Her hair was disheveled. She had no shoes, and her hands were covered in blood. She said nothing. She simply raised her right hand, asking me to stop. I remembered the warning on the radio. I didn't slow down. I passed right by her. As I passed, our eyes met for a split second. There was no fear on her face, nor sadness, just disappointment. I didn't look in the mirror. I kept driving. About 20 minutes later, I reached my right hand out to the passenger seat to grab my coffee thermos. My hand didn't touch a cup. It touched a cold human hand. And inside the cab, right beside me on the right, a quiet female voice was heard. "Why did you leave me there?" I pulled my hand back as if struck by lightning. I didn't dare to look to the right. The woman's voice felt like it was right next to my ear. "You saw me, yet you left." I took a deep breath. There is no one here. I was saying this to myself, not to the passenger seat. The woman laughed softly. Are you sure? I didn't turn my head. I kept looking at the truck's windshield. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated. A message had arrived from the dispatcher. Where are you? Your GPS signal started dropping 20 minutes ago. I typed a short reply. Everything is fine. I pressed send. The message failed. There was no network service. At that exact moment, the seatbelt on the passenger seat buckled itself with a click sound. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw only the seatbelt move. I didn't turn my head. The woman spoke again. You are a good person, but you are a coward. I answered for the first time. Who are you? A long silence followed. Then she said in a very calm voice, I don't know either. That answer terrified me even more. If she were someone playing a trick, she would have given a name. But she truly didn't know. A few kilometers later, I saw a police car on the side of the highway. This time it looked real. Its lights were flashing. An officer stepped out of the vehicle and signaled for me to stop. I took a sigh of relief. Finally, I pulled the truck over to the shoulder. The officer approached and said, Good evening. I'm with the highway patrol. I have a few questions. I rolled down the window. Yes. Did you see a woman on the roadside about 20 minutes ago? Yes. You didn't stop. There was a warning. The officer nodded. You did the right thing. Then he suddenly asked, Then, why did you bring her with you? My heart stopped. What? The officer shone his flashlight into the truck. Directly at the passenger seat. I didn't turn around. I simply said, There's no one here. The officer's face suddenly changed. He turned pale. He took a step back. Then he said in a very low voice, I'm sorry. I must have missing. But as he said this, he wasn't looking at me. He was still staring at the passenger seat. And in his eyes, there was unmistakable terror. The officer suddenly turned off his flashlight. I could clearly see his hands shaking. He said nothing for a few seconds. Then he asked in a low voice, Sir, did she touch you? The question confused me. What? That woman. I didn't let her into the truck. The officer took a deep breath. That's what you think. As soon as he said these words, he pulled a small notebook out of his pocket. He tore out a sheet and handed it to me. If she speaks again, under no circumstances say this name. I looked at the paper. Written on it in large letters was only one name. Emily. Why? The officer didn't answer. He simply said, Whatever you hear, do not turn back. Saying this, he walked toward his patrol car. I started the engine. After driving a few meters away, I instinctively looked in the side mirror. The patrol car was gone. No police. No lights. Not even tire tracks. The highway was completely empty again. At that exact moment, the woman's voice came from the passenger seat. Emily. I froze dead. She had read the name written by the officer. Then she laughed softly. So, they still call me by that name. I felt a freezing breath on the back of my neck. This time she was closer than before. As if her face was right beside my shoulder. Michael. My name is not Emily. I cleared my throat with difficulty. Then, who are you? A long silence followed. Then she answered, "I don't know, but I used to be human." As she said these words, there was a strange sadness in her voice. For the first time, I felt that she sounded not terrifying, but helpless. Right at that moment, static started on the radio. An unknown driver was screaming, "Don't stop. Nobody stop. She is no longer on the highway. She is inside the trucks." A loud metallic crunching sound followed. Someone screamed. Then the radio fell permanently silent. I held my breath. Silence returned to the cab. A few seconds later, the woman whispered, "I didn't do that. Not this time." I couldn't get the last sentence I heard on the radio out of my head. She is no longer on the highway. She is inside the trucks. The woman's voice from the passenger seat was saying something completely different. I didn't do that. One of these two statements was a lie. But which one? The road seemed endless. In the middle of the Nevada desert, the night makes you feel strange. Except for the part illuminated by the headlights, the world feels as if it doesn't exist, and the darkness swallowed everything. About half an hour later, a large rest stop appeared ahead. Normally, there would be dozens of semi-trucks here. But there were only 3 trucks. All of their engines were running. Their headlights were on. However, none of their drivers were visible. I pulled over anyway. I was both exhausted and wanted to understand what was happening. The moment I stepped out of the truck, I felt something strange. There was no wind blowing in the desert. There was absolute silence. So silent that I could hear my own heartbeat. I approached the first semi. Its door was open. I looked inside. It was empty, but the driver's seat was still warm, as if the owner had stepped out just seconds ago. The second semi was in the exact same state. When I approached the third, I froze. A woman was sitting in the passenger seat, in a white dress. Her head was bowed down. This was the woman from my truck. I instinctively backed away. At that exact moment, a familiar voice came from behind me. "Michael." I spun around toward my truck at lightning speed. In the passenger seat, there was no one. So, the woman was no longer in my truck. I slowly looked back toward the third semi. The seat was empty. The woman had vanished again. The pressure in my chest increased. Suddenly, a door sound came from behind. I turned around. The driver's side door of the first semi closed quietly. Then, the door of the second semi. Then, the third. No one had closed any of them. I ran and got into my truck. I locked the door from the inside. I started the engine. Just as I was preparing to pull out, the CB radio turned on by itself. This time a different voice spoke. An old man's voice. It sounded very tired. "If you are hearing this, it means she has chosen you." I picked up the mic. "Who are you?" An answer came. "I was in your place 5 years ago." Breathing sounds were heard on the radio. Then the man continued. "I made the biggest mistake." "What did you do?" I asked. The man said just 4 words. I believed her. At that exact moment, from the passenger seat, the woman whispered in a very quiet voice, "He is lying." As the woman said, "He is lying," the old man on the radio screamed at the exact same time, "Don't listen to her." The voice was so loud that static burst from the radio. I dropped the mic from my hand. "Which of you two is telling the truth?" Neither answered. Only the hum of the engine was heard. A few minutes later, the old man spoke again. Michael, I'm going to ask you something. How many times have you looked at that woman's face? I thought about it. Once. No. Think carefully. I racked my memory. On the side of the road. Then in the passenger seat. Then in the third semi. I suddenly gasped. 3 times. A deep silence fell over the radio. Then the man whispered, "It's too late." Why? Because every time you look at her face, she remembers you better. At that exact moment, the woman on the right side laughed softly. Michael, he isn't telling half of it. Because he looked at me 3 times too. Freezing fear settled in my chest. So the man on the radio had not survived. The woman continued. He said he would help me. Then he abandoned me. I asked, "Who are you really?" There was a long silence. Then, for the first time, her voice trembled. I am a girl who doesn't even remember her own name. My car broke down. I was waiting for help. Then someone pulled over. What happened? The woman didn't answer. She only whispered. I didn't get into his car. But I didn't go home either. After these words, a strange chill filled the cab. For the first time, I thought that maybe she truly was a victim. Right at that moment, an old, rusty memorial sign appeared on the right side of the highway. It read, "In memory of Emily Carter, 1999-2021. And underneath, in small letters, "Body never found." I slammed on the brakes. The truck stopped. The woman said quietly, "I told you. Emily isn't me." This time I looked closely at the sign. The face on the photograph had been erased by the elements over the years. Nothing could be made out. Only my own reflection was visible in the glass frame. Behind my reflection, the woman in the white dress wasn't standing there. In her place, a tall man was standing. His face was not visible. In his hand was a bloody truck key. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I looked at the sign again, the man was gone. Only my own reflection was visible. My hands were shaking. For the first time tonight, I felt that the thing I feared might not be the woman. Hurtling back, I entered the truck. I shut the door. I started the engine. From the passenger seat, the woman asked in a low voice, "Did you see him?" I didn't answer. "You saw him too." "What?" "That man." I cleared my throat. "Do you know him?" The woman was silent for a few seconds. Then she said a sentence that turned the entire story in another direction. "I was running from him." I knitted my brows. "What does that mean?" "He didn't kill me. But he never let me reach anyone." Silence fell over the cab again. For the first time, I remembered the old driver on the radio. He had said, "I believed her. What if she wasn't the woman?" But that man, the moment I had this thought, static started on the radio. The old driver spoke again. "Michael, did you see the sign?" "Yes." "There was no woman in the picture, was there?" "Yes." "That's because that memorial sign wasn't put up for Emily." I froze dead. "What?" The man took a heavy breath. "That road shows you only what you want to see." Suddenly, my phone got a signal. The internet had returned. Curiosity got the better of me. I typed into the search engine, "Emily Carter, Nevada Highway 95." The results opened immediately. The first news story dated back to 2021. I began to read. 24-year-old Emily Carter went missing after her car broke down. Last seen on Highway 95. I scrolled down. Second story. Truck driver suspected in connection with the incident released due to lack of evidence. Third story. My breath caught. Inside the article was a picture of that man. This was the man I had seen on the sign. And at the end of the article, it read, "The suspect driver was another Michael Turner, unrelated to Michael Turner." My hands turned to ice. The name was my name. At that exact moment, the woman in the passenger seat said in a very calm voice, "Now do you understand why I chose you?" I looked at the article again. The name truly was Michael Turner, but the date of birth was different from mine, and the man in the picture looked about 20 years older than me. Despite this, our last name was the same. Our first name was the same. This coincidence started making me uneasy. The woman said quietly, "When I first heard your name, I thought he had returned." I whispered, "I'm not that man." "I know, but at first I didn't know." This was the most sincere sentence the woman had said all night. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated again. This time, another news story opened below the search results. In 2022, 4 more long-haul drivers went missing on the same highway. All of their routes were the same. All of them were driving at night. All were last seen on Highway 95. I swallowed hard. The old driver's voice was heard on the radio again. "Michael, run now. Leave this road immediately." "Why?" "Because he found you." I didn't look in the rearview mirror, nor in the side mirrors. I was looking strictly forward. Suddenly, the woman screamed, "Brakes!" Without thinking, I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded across the asphalt and barely stopped. Just a few meters ahead, a man was standing in the middle of the highway. He had a flashlight in his hand. I recognized him immediately. The picture from the article. The same face. The same jacket. The same tall man. He smiled slowly. Then he raised his flashlight and shone the light toward me. For the first time, I saw his eyes. They were completely black. The man moved his lips. Even though the glass was closed, I clearly read what he said. "This time you will stop." At that exact moment, the truck's engine died on its own. The headlights went dark too. The highway was plunged back into darkness. And out of the darkness, all of a sudden, dozens of human silhouettes began to appear. All were standing in the middle of the road. All were staring at me without moving. The woman said in a trembling voice, only one sentence, "They are the ones he stopped." I couldn't take my eyes off those silhouettes. The headlights were off, but the moonlight was enough to pick out their outlines. Dozens of people were standing completely still in the middle of the road. Some of their faces could be seen, while for others only their shadows were distinguishable. The woman said in a very low voice, "All of them pulled over to help." I cleared my throat with difficulty. "Are they all dead?" She didn't answer right away. A few seconds later, she whispered, "No, some faced a fate worse than that." At that exact moment, the tall man standing in the middle of the road began walking slowly toward me. No footsteps could be heard. His feet moved as if gliding over the asphalt. As he drew closer, the other silhouettes standing in the middle of the road turned their heads toward me at the exact same time. That movement was so synchronized that the hairs on my body stood on end. I tried to start the engine again. I turned the key. Nothing happened. I turned it again. Still no sound came. The woman suddenly grabbed my arm. It was the first time she had touched me all night. Her hand was ice cold. "Don't open the window." I looked at her in surprise. "I'm not opening it." Looking straight through the windshield, the woman said, "He will force you." At that exact moment, the man stopped in front of the truck. Then he pounded on the hood 3 times with his fist. Tap, tap, tap. Then he smiled and slowly reached his hand toward the driver's side window. He didn't touch the glass. His fingers stopped just a few centimeters away. Then his lips moved. I couldn't hear his voice, but I could read what he said. "Help me." The woman immediately shook her head. "No, he always starts like this." I held my breath. The man repeated the exact same sentence. "Help me." This time his voice was heard inside the cab. The window was closed, but his voice felt as if it were right next to my ear. Then other voices began to be heard from behind. Men, women, even children were whispering the exact same sentence. "Help me, help me, help me." The voices kept growing louder. I covered my ears with my hands, but it was no use. They were coming from inside my head. Suddenly the woman screamed, "Michael, look in your right pocket." I shoved my hand into my jacket pocket. Inside was a small metal whistle I had never seen before. "What is this?" the woman said hurriedly. "Blow it." Without thinking, I brought the whistle to my lips and blew with all my strength. Almost no sound was heard. But the moment the whistle was blown, all the silhouettes standing in the middle of the road clutched their heads between their hands at the exact same time and let out a horrifying scream. The smile on the tall man's face vanished for the first time. He looked at me with rage. Then he said slowly, "So, she gave that to you as well." The woman whispered, "Run, Michael. He recognizes you now." I dropped the whistle onto the floor. A strange humming noise was spreading inside the cab. The tall man was no longer smiling. He slowly stepped away from the front of the truck and stood on the right edge of the road, continuing to watch me. The strangest thing was that the other silhouettes also took 2 steps back at the exact same time. It was as if they were all waiting for an order he would give. I turned the key again. This time the engine roared to life. The headlights lit up. The road was illuminated again. The woman immediately screamed. "Now go!" I floored the accelerator pedal. The truck surged forward. As I passed by the tall man, he raised his head and looked straight into my eyes. His lips moved again. "I will find you." I didn't look back. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. The highway was completely empty again. There were no silhouettes nor strange voices. I thought everything had been left behind. Suddenly, my phone rang. The screen displayed dispatch. I picked up the receiver. "Michael, where are you?" The dispatcher's voice sounded very anxious. "I'm on Highway 95. Silence fell on the other end of the line. Then he said in a low voice, "That's impossible." "Why?" "Your GPS hasn't moved for 2 hours. My throat went dry. "What do you mean it hasn't moved? I've driven hundreds of kilometers." The dispatcher replied, "No, you're still at mile 207. I quickly looked at the road sign. My breath caught. Written on the sign was indeed mile 207. So I had been driving for 2 hours, but hadn't advanced even a single meter. My hands were trembling. The woman closed her eyes. As if she had known this all along, she whispered, "He won't let you go." I slammed my fist on the steering wheel in anger. "Why? What do I want from him?" The woman looked straight into my eyes for the first time. There were tears in her eyes. "You don't want anything. But he wants your place." After these words, a deathly silence fell over the cab. Right at that moment, another voice I hadn't heard before was heard on the radio. It was very faint. It came almost like a whisper. "Michael, I'm still here." I recognized that voice immediately. It was my own voice. But that voice was tired, hopeless, and sounded like a person who had been left alone for years. The woman's face suddenly turned pale. She whispered, "We came too late." The voice from the radio was heard again. This time it was clearer. "Michael, don't answer the radio." It was my own voice. There was no doubt about it. My way of speaking, my breathing, even the way I dragged out certain words was identical. I reached my hand toward the mic. The woman immediately grabbed my wrist. "No," I looked at her. "It's me." The woman shook her head. "No, he wants you to believe that." Right at that moment, the voice on the radio laughed. That laugh didn't belong to me. It slowly began to change. Within a few seconds, it turned from a human voice into a completely different, muffled and deep roar. Then it spoke in my voice again. "Michael, she is lying to you." I could no longer tell who was telling the truth. Just then, an old motel appeared on the side of the highway. Half of its neon sign wasn't working. Only one word could be read, "Rest." In the parking lot were dozens of trucks, but strangely, none of their engines were running. All looked as though they had been abandoned for years. Instinctively, I reduced my speed. The woman immediately screamed, "Don't stop." Why? Because they aren't sleeping. I looked at the motel windows again. At first, everything looked empty. Then on the second floor, a curtain was slowly pulled aside. A man was standing behind it. Next, a woman appeared in another window, then in a third, then in a fourth. Within a few seconds, people appeared in all the windows of the motel. All were standing motionless. All were staring at me. There was neither anger nor fear on their faces, just blank stares. I stepped on the gas and the motel was left behind. I had moved about 100 meters away when the woman said in a very low voice, "Don't look in the mirror." I said nothing. "What do you see?" "Nothing." "Good." A few seconds later, a heavy impact sound came from the back of the truck, then a second, then a third. It sounded as if someone were pounding on the trailer door with their fists. The blows grew progressively stronger. I didn't look in the mirror, but after the fourth blow, I clearly heard the voice coming from inside the trailer. "Michael." This time the voice didn't belong to the woman, nor was it my voice from the radio. It was the tall man's voice. He was inside the trailer. Then came the sound of tearing metal, followed by very slow, heavy footsteps, as if someone were stepping out from inside the trailer and walking toward the cab. The color drained from the woman's face. She whispered, "He is already inside." The heavy footsteps from the trailer grew closer. The footsteps walking slowly across the metal were at first in the middle of the trailer, then reached its front wall. Next, stopped right behind my head. A soft knocking sound came from the back wall of the cab. Tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. The woman closed her eyes. "Stay quiet. He is listening to your breath." I pressed my lips together. The knocking suddenly stopped. There were a few seconds of complete silence. Then a very calm male voice was heard from the back wall of the cab. "Michael, open the door." I didn't answer. "You won't be able to run." The woman said in a low voice, "Endure just a little longer." Right at that moment, police lights appeared in the distance ahead. This time they weren't disappearing. I drove toward that direction with all my strength. As I drew closer, dozens of patrol cars, ambulances, and road-blocking barriers began to appear. The highway was completely sealed off. An officer waved at me, signaling to stop. I stopped the truck, opened the door, and jumped down. "Help me!" The officer ran toward me. "Calm down, what happened?" With my trembling hand, I pointed at the trailer. In there, two officers pulled out their weapons and cautiously opened the trailer door. They shone a flashlight inside. They looked for a few seconds, then they turned toward me. "There's no one in here." I looked inside the trailer myself. It was completely empty. Even the load I was hauling had vanished. It was as if the trailer had been caked in dust from not being used for years. I ran back to the cab. The passenger seat was empty too. The woman had vanished. The officer looked at me closely. "Sir, how many hours have you been driving?" I answered. 6 or 7 hours. The officer knitted his brows. "No," he pointed at the watch on his wrist. "You entered this highway only 38 minutes ago." I froze dead. 38 minutes. To me, it felt like the entire night had passed. The officer took me to the patrol car. They took my statement. I talked about Emily. I talked about the tall man. I talked about the motel, the radio, the silhouettes. They said nothing. Toward morning, they let me go. 2 months after the incident, curiosity took me back to that same highway. I found mile 207, but there was no motel there, no memorial sign, nor any gas station, as if none of them had ever existed. I got into my truck to head back. When I started the engine, I saw a small object on the passenger seat, a rusted metal whistle. I hadn't given it to anyone. I slowly picked it up in my hand. On its bottom section was a tiny inscription I hadn't seen before. "Next driver." I never drove on Highway 95 at night again after that night. But sometimes, amidst the static on the radio, I hear a very faint voice. Every time it says the exact same sentence. "Michael, this time it's someone else's turn." My name is David Ross. I've worked as a long-haul trucker in the U.S. for 12 years, and I've never believed in the supernatural. But after what happened to me in the Colorado mountains 2 months ago, I never drove alone at night again. If your GPS offers you an old mountain route called Old Pine Summit Road, don't take that route, no matter how much time it shows you'll save. Because I chose that road. And there I saw trucks that no one but me was driving. My name is David Ross. I am 38 years old, and over many years I've hauled cargo between Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. I was used to mountain roads. I'd driven through icy passes in the middle of winter, and I'd seen rock slides block the road in the summer. But there was one road that the old drivers didn't like to talk about, Old Pine Summit Road. I thought it was just a legend. It was March 2025. I was hauling medical equipment from Denver to Salt Lake City. Due to a heavy blizzard, the main highway was closed. The GPS offered me an alternate route. The screen stated that this road would save me about 50 minutes. I called the dispatcher. GPS is showing me Old Pine Summit Road. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then the dispatcher said, "Don't go that way." "Why?" "It's an old road. It's dangerous." I looked out the window. The snow was getting heavier. It was unknown when the main highway would reopen. 50 minutes was a big difference for me. "It'll be fine," I said and hung up the phone. I turned onto the exit shown by the GPS. After a few kilometers, the highway was left behind. Now I was on a narrow, two-lane mountain road. Tall pine trees flanked both sides of the road. The phone signal suddenly vanished. The GPS map froze, but the navigation voice kept working. "Continue straight for 15 kilometers. This was strange. The map wasn't working, but the voice didn't stop. The weather was getting darker. My headlights could illuminate only a few meters in the snow. Suddenly, a truck appeared from the opposite direction. It was normal, but as it drew closer, I noticed something strange. In the driver's seat, there was no one. The truck was moving on its own. As I passed by it, I instinctively looked inside. The steering wheel was turning by itself, and the cab was completely empty. I wanted to look back, but at that exact moment, the GPS said a sentence in a calm female voice that it had never said before. "Do not look back. They want you to turn around." My hand froze on the steering wheel. It was impossible for the GPS to say this sentence. I had used the same app for years. It never said anything other than the route. I looked at its screen. The map had gone completely black. Only a single word was visible in the upper right corner, rerouting, but the route wasn't changing. The snow was getting denser. The trees on the side of the road now looked like mere black shadows. A few minutes later, a second truck came from the opposite direction. I looked closely into its cab. This time, too, there was no driver. The passenger seat was empty as well. Its engine was running, its headlights were on, but no one was visible driving it. I whispered to myself, "This is impossible." At that exact moment, the CB radio crackled. "Can anyone hear me?" I immediately picked up the mic. "Yes, I hear you." A deep breath came from the other side. "How many empty trucks have you seen?" The question was so sudden that I delayed my answer by a few seconds. "Two." There was a long silence on the radio. Then the man said softly, "When you see the third, under no circumstances stop." "Why?" No answer came. The line cut out. I called on the radio again. "Does anyone hear me?" Silence. Only static noise. 5 minutes later, the road entered a sharp turn. As soon as I cleared the turn, I slammed on the brakes with all my strength. A third truck was parked in front of me. This time it wasn't moving. It was standing right in the middle of the road. Its headlights were on. Its engine was running. Yet the cab still looked empty. There was no room to pass by it. I had no choice but to stop. The engine was running, yet there was absolute silence all around. A few seconds later, the high beams of the parked truck suddenly went out. Then its low beams came on, then went out again, 3 times in a row, as if it was signaling to me. At that exact moment, the GPS spoke again. This time its voice was fainter than before. Do not open the door. I wasn't doing anything. I was simply looking at the truck ahead. Suddenly, in the driver's seat that looked empty, a silhouette slowly began to appear. First the head, then the shoulders, then the whole body. Except that figure wasn't sitting behind the wheel. It was standing up behind the driver's seat, and it was looking straight at me. I couldn't take my eyes off that figure. The snow was hitting the windshield, yet I could clearly see it moving. It was standing completely still behind the driver's seat. I couldn't make out its face. The inside of the cab was dark. Only 2 eyes seemed to look at me out of the darkness. Then the figure slowly raised its hand. It gestured for me to come closer. My body was frozen. At that exact moment, the GPS spoke again. Do not look at the glass. But it was already too late. I was already looking at it. The figure gestured a second time, then suddenly vanished. The cab was empty again. I tried to take a breath of relief. Just as I was about to hit the gas, there was a knock at my door. Tap, tap, tap. On the other side of the driver's side window, a man was standing. This was impossible. A second ago, no one was there. The man was wearing a thick winter jacket. He was bearded. His face was covered in snow. His lips had turned blue. He approached the window and said in a low voice, "Please, my radio isn't working. I don't have a phone either. Take me to the nearest town." I didn't open the door. I just wanted to roll down the window a bit. The GPS suddenly screamed in a loud voice. No. My finger froze over the button. The man's face changed. His pleading expression vanished. He smiled. A very strange, very unnatural smile. Then he said in a calm voice, "You hear it too. So I'm late." I pulled back. "What do you want?" The man didn't answer. He simply looked at the back of my truck. Then he said very slowly, "They are already in your trailer." Cold sweat ran down my chest. Instinctively, I wanted to look in the side mirror. The GPS spoke again. "Do not look at the trailer." At that exact moment, the sound of tearing metal came from the back of my truck. Then a heavy impact, followed by another. It felt as if someone was pounding on the door from inside the trailer. And the man was still smiling. And he said his final sentence. "They always start with the empty trucks." The sounds of metal pounding grew progressively stronger. Bang, bang, bang. With every hit, the entire trailer shook. I thought the cargo was shifting, but this sound wasn't coming from the cargo. This was rhythmic, as if someone inside was pounding on the door to get out. The man standing by the window had suddenly vanished. In the blink of an eye, no one was left there. I floored the gas. At that exact moment, the truck in front of me pulled off to the side of the road on its own, without any driver, as if giving me the right of way. I sped past it. I didn't look back. Yet the impacts from the trailer didn't stop. The CB radio turned on again. This time the same man was speaking. "Did you pass the third truck?" "Yes." The man took a deep breath. "Then your time is short." "For what?" "Because They are already checking your load. I didn't understand anything. What are you talking about? What's in your trailer? Medical equipment. There was a long silence on the radio. Then the man asked a very strange question. Did you see the inside of the trailer yourself while it was being loaded? I thought about it. No. At the warehouse, the workers had closed the trailer and handed me the paperwork. I hadn't gone inside. The man whispered. I didn't go in either. As soon as he said these words, static burst on the radio, followed by another voice. This time it was a woman's voice. Very calm, very tired. David. I froze dead. I recognized this voice. This was the voice of my wife, Sarah. But Sarah was at home. David. Stop. Open the trailer. Someone is inside. My heart was beating as if it would burst out of my chest. The man on the radio screamed, Don't listen. She is not your wife. At that exact moment, the pounding from the trailer suddenly stopped. Total silence fell. This silence was scarier than before, because there was no sound anymore. No metal, no radio, no wind, only slow footsteps on the roof of the truck. Step, step, step. Someone was walking across the roof of the trailer toward the cab. The footsteps on the roof slowly drew closer. Step, step, step. Every step vibrated the cab's ceiling. I didn't dare to raise my head. It felt as if that thing was standing on the other side of the ceiling. I held my breath. The footsteps suddenly stopped. Then from right above the ceiling came the sound of long fingernails scratching. CRRRRRR, as if someone were slowly dragging across the metal. The GPS kicked back on. This time, the female voice was more serious than before. Do not drop your speed below 60 mph. I looked at the speedometer. 59. 58. Because of the snowy road, the truck was slowing down. I slammed the gas all the way down. 60. 61. 62. The moment I passed 60, the scratching sound on the roof abruptly stopped. I tried to breathe a sigh of relief. But this relief lasted for merely a few seconds. A tunnel appeared ahead. An old stone tunnel. At its entrance was a rusted sign. It read, Old Pine Summit Tunnel. As I drew near the tunnel, the GPS said something other than the route for the first time. Do not stop in the tunnel. At that exact moment, another truck appeared in the opposite lane. This time it was empty as well. Yet there was a different detail. No one was in the driver's seat. However, a woman was sitting in the passenger seat. Her head was bowed down. As I passed by the truck, she slowly raised her face. This was Sarah, my wife. From behind the window, she moved her lips while crying. Don't leave me here. I instinctively tapped the brakes. The GPS immediately screamed, Keep going. At that exact moment, Sarah's face began to change. Her skin turned a gray color. Her eyes went completely black. Her mouth opened in an inhuman way. And the truck entered the darkness of the tunnel without even having a driver and vanished. My hands were shaking. I entered the tunnel. The headlights illuminated only stone walls. Suddenly, the GPS signal vanished completely. The screen went dark. The radio fell silent. The phone shut off. The only thing working in the cab was the clock, and it had started counting down. 09:59, 09:58, 09:57. I knew that such a function had never existed. At that exact moment, where I was supposed to see the exit at the end of the tunnel. I saw the entrance of another tunnel, and in front of it, 5 driverless trucks were silently waiting for me. I didn't touch the brake. I gripped the wheel tightly and drove straight ahead. The clock kept counting down. 0941, 0940, 0939. Every second, a metallic clinking sound echoed inside the cab. The 5 trucks in front of me had blocked both lanes of the road. None of their headlights were on. Only their silhouettes were visible in the darkness. As I drew closer, a strange detail was picked out. All 5 had the logo of the same company on their doors. This was the company I worked for. A strange feeling arose in my chest. This is impossible. I tried to read the license plate of the first truck. The plate looked familiar. As I got a little closer, my heart stopped. This was my trailer's plate number. The second truck, the third, the fourth, the fifth, on all of them, my plate number was written. It was as if the same truck had appeared in front of me 5 times. The clock kept going. 0852, 0851. Suddenly, the doors of all 5 trucks opened at the exact same time. I held my breath. Drivers began stepping out of the cabs. First driver, second, third, fourth, fifth, all of them were me, except at different ages. One was younger. One was bearded. One had blood on his face. One was missing his right arm. And the last one, his face was burned beyond recognition. All 5 looked at me at the exact same time. Then they said the exact same sentence at the exact same time. "You're late too." I floored the gas with all my strength. The truck went straight toward them, just a few meters before collision. All 5 vanished. The tunnel was empty again. Yet the clock hadn't stopped. 0713. At that exact moment, a familiar female voice was heard from behind the cab. This time not the GPS, nor Sarah. Someone completely different. It was a very old woman. She whispered, "They are the previous drivers." I didn't look back. "Who are you?" The woman answered, "I am the wife of the man who failed to close this road the last time." "What does that mean?" There were a few seconds of silence. Then she said a sentence that gave the entire night a different meaning. "This road doesn't kill people. It steals their reflection." I gripped the steering wheel even harder. The last sentence spoken by the old woman echoed repeatedly in my mind. "This road doesn't kill people. It steals their reflection." I asked, "What about those drivers?" The woman answered in a calm voice, "They are still alive." This statement terrified me even more. "What do you mean alive?" "They returned to their homes, met their families, continued their jobs, but those who returned were no longer them." An icy chill ran down the back of my neck. The clock kept counting down. 0648, 0647, 0646. The tunnel still wasn't ending. A tunnel this long couldn't exist in Colorado. Suddenly, I saw a strange reflection on the windshield. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Then I understood. It wasn't just my reflection in the glass. In the driver's seat, 2 people were sitting. One was me. The other, someone else who looked exactly like me. He was holding the steering wheel too, except I was holding the wheel with my right hand. He was holding it with his left hand. And while I wasn't smiling, he slowly began to smile. Instinctively, I pulled my gaze away from the windshield. The GPS suddenly turned back on, except this time its voice had changed. It was no longer a woman's voice. It was my voice. "Route completed," I shouted. "Shut up," the GPS replied. "It's already too late, David." At that exact moment, the tunnel abruptly came to an end. Daylight was visible ahead. I exited the tunnel. The sky was clear. There was no snow. The road was completely dry, as if what I had experienced just a few minutes ago had never happened. The phone signal returned. The radio started working. The GPS was showing a normal map. I took a deep breath. Maybe it was all over. Just then the phone rang. The screen displayed Sarah. I answered the call. "David, finally. We've been looking for you for 2 days." My heart stopped. 2 days? What are you talking about? I've been in that tunnel for only half an hour. Silence fell on the other end of the line. Then Sarah said, crying, "David, you went missing 2 days ago." I slowly pulled the phone away from my ear. Sarah was still crying, but I could no longer hear what she was saying. 2 days, that was impossible. To me, only 30 to 40 minutes had passed in the tunnel. With my hands trembling, I looked at my watch. My watch still showed the date from 2 days ago. The phone, however, showed a completely different day. Both couldn't be true at the same time. Sarah continued speaking anxiously on the phone. The police, the company, search teams. All of them had reportedly been looking for me for 2 days. Meanwhile, I thought I had been in that tunnel for that entire duration. Finally pulling myself together, I said, "I'm fine, I'll be home shortly." I hung up the call. I was still trying to make sense of what had happened. About 15 minutes later, I reached the first gas station. As soon as I walked inside, the old man sitting at the register looked closely at my face. Then his color suddenly turned pale. "You," I approached. "What's wrong?" The man whispered, "I saw you on TV." A strange feeling arose in my chest. "What do you mean?" From under the register, he pulled out a local newspaper. On the front page of the newspaper was a picture of my truck. The headline read, "Long-haul trucker missing in Colorado mountains." Beneath the picture was my name, but that wasn't what startled me. In the picture, 2 people were visible in the driver's seat through the windshield of the truck. One was me. The other person's face was blurry. The cashier said, "The police enlarged the photo, but they couldn't identify who the second person was." With a trembling hand, I folded the newspaper. Without saying anything, I walked out of the store. As I walked toward my truck, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. Everything looked normal. For a moment, I felt relieved. Then I reached my hand out to open the door. My reflection in the mirror, however, didn't move. I was holding the door handle. Yet he was still sitting behind the steering wheel. Then very slowly, he turned his head toward me, and his lips moved. I arrived first. I spun around quickly. The inside of the truck was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection looked normal again. But after that night, whenever I look in the mirror, I always feel a 1-second delay. It's as if the person in front of me watches me first, then repeats my movements. And every time I ask myself the same question. Was the one who came out of the tunnel truly me? Or was it someone else who came out in my place? After that incident, I tried to return to work. I convinced myself that all of it was the result of insomnia, stress, and a tense night spent on mountain roads. The company also sent me to a psychologist. The doctor talked to me for hours and eventually said that in such cases, a person's sense of time can be disrupted. I nodded in agreement, but I didn't tell him one thing. Every morning when I shaved, my reflection in the mirror always moved half a second later than me. It was very subtle. No one else would notice it, but I saw it every single day. A week later, the company sent me back on the road. This time, the route passed through a completely different state. I intentionally tried to stay far away from Colorado. In the afternoon, I unloaded the cargo and was heading back. Everything was normal. In the evening, I pulled over at a small truck stop to eat. When I walked inside, the news was playing on the TV. The anchor was talking about the weather. Suddenly, the screen changed. Colorado. Mountain road. Police cars. Then the anchor said, Another truck has been found near Old Pine Summit Road. I dropped my spoon. On the screen was the tunnel I had driven through. Officers were opening the trailer door. The anchor continued. The driver has not been found. A strange detail was discovered inside the cab. A close-up shot was shown on the screen. Behind the driver's seat, on the dusty glass, someone had written a sentence with a finger. I didn't make it out. My heart tightened. I had heard those words somewhere before. Suddenly, I remembered. The 5 different me's I had seen in the tunnel. One of them had looked at me and said, "You're late too." Maybe they had never been able to leave the tunnel. Maybe the ones who came out were merely their reflections. At that exact moment, a message arrived on my phone from an unknown number. It was just one picture. The picture was taken at night. My truck was visible, yet the person who took the picture was sitting inside the cab and behind the steering wheel. I was driving the truck. Under the picture, only one sentence was written. "I am still in the tunnel." I looked at the message for a long time. My fingers were frozen over the phone. I enlarged the picture. At first glance, everything looked normal. I was behind the wheel, the road was dark. It was snowing, but looking closely, I noticed a detail. In the shadow behind the driver's seat, a face could be made out. That face was my face, yet it looked older, more tired, and more terrified. I immediately called the number. The call wouldn't go through. The number did not exist. A few seconds later, a second message arrived. This time it was text. "You left me there." I took a deep breath. I didn't leave anyone there. As I said this, I was scared of my own voice, because I was no longer sure myself. I didn't return home that night. I sat in the truck and waited until morning. When the sun rose, I made my decision. I was going back to Old Pine Summit Road, because without knowing what happened, I couldn't continue my life. 2 days later, I went back to Colorado. I didn't tell anyone. I turned off the GPS. I set the phone aside. I just wanted to find the old road. When I reached the road, I felt something strange. There was no snow at all. Yet there was ice on the trees. It was as if that place belonged to another time. I found the old tunnel. I stood at the entrance. At first, I didn't want to go inside. Then I told myself, I won't be afraid this time. Slowly, I entered the tunnel. I had walked a few meters when I saw something on the side of the road. An old radio. A CB radio. I picked it up. It had no battery. Yet it worked. And a voice came from inside it. My voice. If you are hearing this, it means you have come in my place. I froze dead. The radio continued. David, you are not the first. And you won't be the last. From the depth of the tunnel came the sound of an engine. It was slowly drawing near. A truck was coming. Its headlights cut through the darkness. I pulled back. The truck passed right in front of me. Behind the steering wheel, there was no one. Yet someone was sitting in the passenger seat. Me. And this time, he looked at me and smiled. I stood frozen in my tracks. The truck passing in front of me slowly receded into the darkness of the tunnel, but I will never be able to forget the face of the man sitting in the passenger seat. It was me. The same face, the same eyes, the same voice. The only difference was that, unlike me, he looked as if he knew what was happening. The truck vanished at the end of the tunnel. I decided to go after it, because running away was pointless now. I walked toward the depth of the tunnel. With every step, the radio began to speak more clearly. David, do you hear me? This was my voice. I tried to warn you. I once thought like you too. I thought I had made it out. Faint lights began to illuminate the walls of the tunnel. On the walls were scratched dates. Dozens of dates. Dozens of names. All belonged to truck drivers. At the very bottom, my name was written. David ROSS. And next to the date, there was still an empty space. I pulled back. No. Right at that moment, a voice came from behind me. I said that too. I turned around. An old man was standing in front of me. He was the driver who had spoken on the radio before. I tried to help someone. Then the road chose me. I asked, "What is this road?" The man looked into the darkness of the tunnel. "This road doesn't keep those who are lost. This road keeps those who want to find themselves." I didn't understand anything. He continued, "Every driver makes a choice when they come here. Either they pass through, or they try to save the one left behind. But the problem is, no one can save the one before them." Suddenly, engine sounds came from inside the tunnel. Dozens of trucks, all empty. All of their headlights were on. Yet none of them had a driver. The old man looked at me. "Now it's your turn." I closed my eyes. Then I remembered the whistle. That metal whistle. I pulled it out and blew with all my strength. The tunnel shook. The headlights of the trucks went out one by one. The names on the walls began to erase. The old man slowly vanished. Then in the darkness in front of me, I heard my own voice. Finally, someone chose to go back. When I opened my eyes, I was already on top of the mountain. Morning was breaking. There was no tunnel. There was no road. There was just forest and silence. After that day, I never drove long haul again. But sometimes at night, when I pass behind trucks, I see a strange thing. Empty trucks, headlights on, moving slowly. And every time, I see the same writing on their rear window. A driver always stays inside. I still don't know. Was the one who came out of the tunnel truly me? Or was it someone else who came out in my place?